up, friends? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing well, and I hope you are ready for another Dior beauty review, because take a look at what I've got my hands on today. Both of the quints for summer 2024. We have Pastel Glow and Coral Flame. We are going to be taking a look at these today. I have swatches, I have several looks to show you guys, and I have lots of comparisons, all filmed in natural daylight. In addition to that, I also have the new Dior Forever Glow Maximizer in the newest edition, Nude. We're also going to be playing around with this today, so if you want to hang out with me today and hear all of my completely honest thoughts about Dior Summer 2024, then keep watching. Let's kick things off by taking a look at the eyeshadow palettes. Now we have Pastel Glow and Coral Flame. These are both limited edition for summer 2024, so they're not going to be sticking around forever. I did notice that the price increased just slightly for these. They are now $70 USD. The prices keep going up, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. They have all the same properties as the other Dior eyeshadow palettes that we normally see. They're talc-free. They have the 6-month shelf life. They are made in France, etc. So all of that is remaining the same. Let's take a look at each of the palettes one by one, starting off with number 933, Pastel Glow. This one is definitely the more popular of the two. I can already tell, at least with my subscribers. And on the Dior website, these colors are described as a mint heart and luminous copper shades enhanced by a pastel lavender. This is definitely kind of like neutrals with a pop of color. At first glance, this palette does look very cool tone because you have the icy blue and also the lavender, but these other shades that surround those pops of color, I would say they're kind of on the neutral side. They're not totally cool toned. It's neutrals with pops of color. And we are seeing a lot of brands doing this ice blue color. I'll show you some comparisons a little bit later in this video. So it is interesting to see Dior launching yet another palette with kind of like an icy blue, somewhat topper shade. I also want to mention, friends, that this palette, it does lean pretty light. You will be able to tell from the swatches that all of the shades are kind of like a sheeny, slightly sparkly, satiny type of formula. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. You're not going to get like a ton of depth from this palette, and that will come across in the demos in just a second. And then of course we have number 333, which is called Coral Flame. This is described as a coral pink heart and a gradation of bronze enhanced by a sunny yellow. Once again, we have neutrals with some pops of color. It is the same concept, except this one is going to be a lot warmer and sandier and sunnier in tone than the other one. So if you love warm tones like me, you might want to pay attention to this one. In just a second, I am going to show you some looks that I created with each of these palettes. But before we get into that, I do just want to take a moment to describe the formula that we're getting in each of these. In both of the palettes, we don't have any mattes. And I also would argue that this is not the typical Dior satin formula. I do think that these have a little bit more of like a sheen and a sparkle to them, kind of like the Tom Ford wet dry formula, except maybe a little bit more transparent. So with that, let's get into the demos with each of these palettes. Once again, I'm going to kick things off with this palette, Pastel Glow. I actually created 2 looks with this palette, and for the first look, I really wanted to celebrate the pops of color, the ice blue and the lavender. And starting off this look, I went in with the ice blue. I just went for it, and I applied this mostly on the inner half of the eye. Notice how it doesn't pop out as like a normal blue eyeshadow. It's more of like a beautiful frosty wash of color, almost like a white but with a blue undertone. Now Dior calls this color a mint. To me, mint is more green in tone. This is not green. This is definitely more of like a baby ice blue. I do think that if you have a deeper complexion, this color is probably gonna pop a little bit more on your skin. I'm very fair, but nonetheless, I really like the way that this looked on my eyes. Next, I went into the lavender shade, and I applied that more towards the outside half of the eye, just to kind of give it, you know, like a little bit of a watercolor effect. Some of us might be thinking, ooh, lavender and blue all over the eye. That's like a little bit too crazy for me, but you guys can see that these colors are a little bit more on the subtle side, and a big part of the experience of wearing them on the eye is just like the beautiful sheen that you get when you kind of move your head in the light. So they don't stand out too much, and I feel like that is the look that Dior is going for. So just letting you guys know, they're not crazy bright colors. They're a little bit more on like the sheerer side. The next step that I did was dip into this beautiful light ballet pink, and I applied that to the lower lash line. This color is a little bit closer to my skin tone, so this is gonna be very, very natural. Really doesn't pop that much on me, but I do think that this would be a really pretty one and done shade for me when I'm feeling a little bit lazy and want something very neutral, maybe if I'm wearing like a bright lipstick or something like that. And then lastly, guys, I went into the deepest shade in the palette, this beautiful copper, and I applied that lightly to the outer V just to add a little bit of depth. I really like this color. It's beautiful. It's not just a copper, because I feel like copper sounds very warm. It's more like a deep rose gold, and there's a little bit of like a golden sparkle in there. It's just beautiful. I really like the way that this pairs with the other shades in the palette. I don't think that I would have thought to pair them together. I applied some mascara, and this is look number 1, friends. I know it's very subtle, it's very light, but you can clearly see there the beautiful lavender, the ice blue. Comment down below, let me know what you think, and let me know if this is a look that you could see yourself wearing every day. Now, you probably noticed that in that look, I did not use this sandy gold shade. I also didn't really get to use much of the coppery rose gold, which I just said I really, really like. So I decided to do this look that I'm wearing today because, once again, I wanted to highlight those colors, and I also wanted to show you a look that didn't include the lavender. So for this look, I first went in with the beautiful sandy gold all over the eye and also on the lower lash line. Just like the pink, this is like a good everyday shade, good, you know, neutral to have in your palette. It kind of gives you a starting point. If you don't really know how to use the pops of color, you can always dip into this one first. And then I went into the coppery rose gold, and I really tried to layer this one up a little bit more in this look. So I concentrated it along kind of the crease and like the outer V, really just building it up so you could see it a lot more. Then I went into the pink, and I actually just kind of dabbed this in the center of the lid. I really like the way that this color layers on top of the coppery rose gold. It's really pretty. It's kind of like a soft gradient because this one has some rosy tones in it. I think it really worked. And then finally what I did is I went into the ice blue, and I just used that as a little highlight in the inner corner. I thought it looked so cute, so fresh, really kind of like opened up the eye. And then for this look, I did decide to do a little bit of liquid liner. I used the new Lisa Eldridge Kitten Liner, which I feel like works so well for just a really natural little wing. So this is look number 2. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Do you prefer the look with the lavender, or do you like this kind of more neutral look? I wanted to show you guys 2 options, so I hope that this is helpful. And of course, next up, we are gonna be taking a look at this palette, Coral Flame. And for this look, I really, once again, wanted to celebrate the 2 pops of color that are in this palette, the coral and the sunny yellow. So I started off the look with the coral shade, and I just applied that all over my lid. Hopefully you guys can tell here in the natural light demo that this has kind of like a really pretty golden sheen to it, like a golden shift. I don't want to say duochrome because it makes it sound like it's really strong, really pigmented, but it's a really beautiful kind of corally golden shift so that it's not too strong and too orangey. It's really, really pretty. And then next up, I went into the golden shade, and I applied that more so to the inner half of the eye and also to the lower lash line. I noticed that this shade, it is more sparkly than all of the other shades across both of the palettes. So keep that in mind if you like a little bit more sparkle. You know, it's not chunky or anything, but if you like a little bit more sparkle, that's a really good shade to go in with. Kind of reminds me of, like, you know, the sparkling sands on the beach or something like that. Next, I went into this medium toned rose gold shade, and I tried to apply this to the crease to kind of get a little bit more depth. What I will say is that I think that these 3 shades in the middle of the palette, because they are all similar in tone, the colors are different, but they're similar in tone, I feel like you don't need to use all 3 of these in a look. I did because I'm trying to show you guys, you know, how to play around with this palette, but I don't think you need to use all 3 of them, because when I went in with that, I felt like I couldn't really see it, okay? Because I was layering it on top of these other 2. It's a really beautiful shade, and I think that if you applied this all over the lid, it would be an absolute stunner. It has a really nice tone to it, but layered on top of these, it just like really didn't add anything to the look. And then the moment that we've been waiting for, I dipped into the beautiful sunny yellow, and I applied that to the inner corner of the eye, just kind of brightening up the look. I really like this. It's very smooth, it's very brightening, and I also like the fact that, you know, it doesn't look too starkly yellow. I think you need to think of this as kind of like a highlight shade, as an eye brightener, and it also doesn't have any glitter to it. So it just adds a really, really beautiful sheen. It really reminds me of the yellow that is in that Chanel LeBlanc, what was it called? Délice palette, which we're gonna do a comparison of later on in this video. To finish up this look, I went into the deep brown right here, and I actually used this as a liner to add a little bit more depth and dimension along the upper lash line. I kind of winged it out a little bit. This color is actually decently pigmented, so if you wanted to smoke this look out just a little bit, I definitely think you could get away with that. And finally, friends, I applied some mascara, and this is the look with Coral Flame. Comment down below, let me know what you think. It is a pretty warm palette, but once again, these shadows are not like the strongest ever, so I think it still has a lot of really pretty softness, even for my friends out there who are kind of afraid of more of these orangey tones. But leave me a comment down below and you let me know what you think. And then finally, I have the Dior Forever Glow Maximizer. These are the liquid highlighters from Dior. They actually recently released these. They had 6 shades in the original release, and then they just came out with this one for summer, and this shade is called Nude. I'll show you guys the swatches here. This is described on Sephora as a blush bronze, and I don't know if I would agree with that. I would say that this is a nude with kind of like slightly pinky undertones. It's kind of like a champagne shade, like a classic highlight shade for somebody with my skin tone. If you missed it, I already reviewed this formula, so I will link that review down below in case you want to hear a little bit more about it and see some comparisons with like the Charlotte Tilbury and the Rare Beauty. But I think you guys can see right here, this is a really beautiful, natural, glowy shade, and I really like the kind of moisturized, dewy look that these give the skin. They are not slimy, they're not greasy, they don't like disturb your makeup. They do kind of dry down, but they dry down to a very like hydrating finish. They're absolutely beautiful. Once again, if you want to hear more in-depth comparisons and kind of my preferences between these, the Rare Beauty liquid highlighters and the Charlotte Tilbury liquid highlighters, then definitely check out my other review. But I just wanted to show you guys this new shade on my skin tone in natural light so you can get an idea if maybe you want this one compared to the other ones that are in the range. Before I get into my final thoughts, I am going to show you guys some comparisons with all 3 of the products that I'm reviewing today. If you want to skip ahead to my final thoughts, timestamps will be down below. But I think you should take a look at these because some of these products are actually similar to some other popular products that I have in my collection, and you might already own them. So hopefully this will help you guys decide what to get and also get kind of a clear picture of the formula and how the formulas might compare to other products. Before we get into the eyeshadows, I am going to quickly do the comparisons with the Dior Forever Glow Maximizer just because it's going to be a little bit quicker. Now, I want to say right off the bat, because I know I'm going to get questions about it, I do not have the peachy Dior Forever Glow Maximizer. That's one of the ones that I haven't gotten yet, and I feel like that's the one that is probably the most similar in tone to this one. But I do have some other liquid highlighters in my collection that are very similar. So I'll show you the swatch comparisons right here. At the top, we have the Dior Forever Glow Maximizer in the shade Nude. Then we have the Charlotte Tilbury Beauty Light Wand in the shade Pillow Talk. It is almost the same. And you know what, guys? I feel so bad because one of you asked me if this was just like the Charlotte Tilbury, and I was like, no, that one's more pink, that one's more pink. I was wrong, okay? I was wrong. You were right. They're very similar. The Charlotte Tilbury one is just a little bit more pink, but they're kind of the same in that they're like a champagne-y, pinky nude highlighter, okay? And then the third swatch that you guys see right here is the Charlotte Tilbury Beauty Light Wand in the shade Spotlight. And I thought it would be good to take a look at this because this one is more of like a light gold. So if you have more of those like bright, reflective, light gold highlighters in your collection, just know that this one in the nude shade, it's gonna be a little bit more subdued. Next, I'm gonna do some comparisons with the Pastel Glow palette, and I'm gonna start things off with the most highly requested comparison, and that is with the Chanel Délice palette. This was from the LeBlanc collection last year, I believe it was, and I could totally see why you guys wanted this comparison because these palettes, in fact, are pretty similar. I mean, I know you don't have the yellow, you have the yellow in the Coral Flame palette instead, but Dior is definitely borrowing some of these colors, okay? I would say that the differences here is that the Dior formula is a little bit, I know I've been using this word a lot in this review, more like ethereal. It's more shimmery, it's slightly more sheer, whereas the Chanel one, it's slightly more like opaque and pigmented. And then the yellow shade is like your topper shade. Like there's more differentiation between the types of formulas in the single palette. I will say I like the pink shade in the Dior palette more than I like the pink shade that is in the Chanel palette. Love both of these palettes, but I do kind of like the fact that the Dior one does give you a little bit extra to work with. They're both really good, but there are some similarities, so it's up to you to decide if this is different enough for it to be worth the $70 price tag. I also want to do a comparison with the recently released Chanel Rivage palette. Now I know that these palettes are very different in tone, but I feel like a lot of people are going to ask me about the two blue shades, so I just want to show you guys that the blue in the Rivage palette, it is much more vibrant and pigmented. If you really want to notice the blue, if you want people to think, oh wow, she's wearing blue eyeshadow, then I would go for that one. Still really beautiful and subtle, but you guys can kind of see the differences there. I felt like I would get questions about it, so I wanted to show that as well. Next, I have a comparison with another recently released Dior palette. This one is called Mimi Rose, and they also did kind of like a frosty, minty blue in this one as well. I will say that the blue in this palette, it is brighter and more sparkly. Overall, the palette is a lot more pink, and it also is more pigmented. You can kind of tell that the formulas are different. Hopefully that is coming across. The formulas in these Dior palettes, they're more of like a sheer and baked type of formula. I also received a couple requests to compare this palette with the Guerlain Summer Jean palette from last year, obviously because you have that beautiful lavender shade. The blues are clearly different, but if you take a look at some of the similar shades, you can tell the tones are very on par, but obviously the Guerlain palette is much more pigmented, and it also is not as sparkly. And lastly, I have a comparison that nobody requested, but I kind of wanted to show this to you maybe for some inspiration. This is one of the Chanel Byzance palettes. This one is called Power Venetienne, and I know a lot of you guys have the Power Cristal one as well, which is kind of similar in tone. I want you to think for a second what the Dior palette would look like if you just covered up the lavender shade, okay? Because it's very similar to the Chanel palette at the end of the day. You have three neutrals, and then you have this pop of kind of like an icy blue. The one in the Chanel palette is like more glittery. It's more of like a, you know, gemstone style topper, because that was the theme of the collection, was like the Byzantine jewelry. At the end of the day, it's kind of like very similar tones. I don't know. Comment down below and let me know what you think. I thought it was an interesting comparison. And lastly, we have comparisons with the Coral Flame palette, starting off with the Dior Summer palette from last summer, which was called Rivage. Not to be confused with the Chanel Rivage palette from this year. I know, there's so many palettes here, guys. This is from last summer, and a couple of people were saying that they thought that this new palette looked just like the one from last year, but I would argue that they look a little bit different. I know that they're in like the same color family, and this isn't like the most groundbreaking color story, but I do think that this one is a little bit more light and shimmery, and also it is more coral. Like the formulas are just different, and the Rivage palette from last year, at least to me, it kind of came across a little bit more like sandy and brown. Next up, I have one of the Dior palettes from spring this year. This is called Poplin Peach, and I want to show you guys just in the side-by-side that Poplin Peach is much more pink. It's more of like a pinky coral. There's other pinks that are in the palette, so I do definitely think that these are different enough. Here is a good comparison though. This one is really good. Thank you guys for requesting this one. This is with the Tom Ford Golden Hour palette. I think that there's some real similarities here. Now, the formulas are not exact, but they're pretty similar. The one from Dior, it's a little bit more shimmery and it's a little bit more sheer. I think that the Tom Ford Wet Dry formula is just a little bit more pigmented, but they both look like they're baked formulas, and the tones here are very similar. I would say if you have this Tom Ford palette, I think that this one from Dior is probably a skip. And similarly here, we also have the Peach Dawn palette from Tom Ford. This one is one of my favorites. I love the peachy tones. And here also we have some similar shades. There's not as much contrast in the Tom Ford palette because we have deeper shades, we have lighter shades, but they're all kind of in the same color family. So hopefully these comparisons are helpful for you guys. I feel like if you have either of those Tom Ford palettes, it's like you can probably create something that is within the same realm of what you're getting from Coral Flame. And then the last one that I have here is a comparison with the Chanel Coral Treasure palette that recently released in their collection. I don't really think that these are similar. I know they both say coral, but the Coral Treasure palette to me is more of like a pink and coral palette. It's more like orangey, more like hot pink. It is much more vibrant, and the looks that I get with that always end up very different than what I get from Coral Flame. And then finally friends, I have one more comparison here to show you guys. As I was kind of taking a look at these palettes, I noticed that a lot of these shades are in one of my favorite summer palettes, which is the Viseart Soleil La Plage. I feel like, you know, while there's no lavender and pink in the Viseart palette, I feel like you have a lot of those warmer shades. You have the pop of yellow, you have the pop of blue. That's why I love this palette so much. And you can see in the swatches that obviously like the Viseart is more vibrant, it's more pigmented. But hey, if you're looking at these palettes and you really like the colors, but maybe you just, you know, you want something more pigmented, and that's totally cool, I would highly recommend the Viseart palette. I will link a video down below where I do a demo of that palette in case you want to see, you know, how that looks, how I like to use it. Woo! Okay, I hope that all that was helpful, friends. And now I'm gonna sum up everything in my final thoughts. Which of these do I like the most? Which do I think are worth it? Are any of these worth it? Okay, because the prices keep climbing. I'm gonna share with you guys what I recommend. Out of the 3 items that I reviewed for you here today, my favorite one is the Pastel Glow Eyeshadow Palette. I really like this palette. I know that it is more sheer. You have to be someone that likes kind of these lighter sheer, kind of shimmery, ethereal types of shadows, but I have a lot of subscribers who do like that. So I call that out as not necessarily a pro, not necessarily a con, but it is a pro for me, if that makes sense. I really just like the fact that I can go in a couple of different directions. That's why I wanted to do 2 looks with this palette. You can go super light and pastel. You can go very kind of neutral, basic, and everyday. You can deepen things up with the beautiful coppery rose gold, brighten things up with a pop of color with the blue. You can go lavender all over the eye. Like, you can do a lot of looks with this palette. And that's why this is the one item that I would recommend picking up, because it's $70 now. They're so expensive. At least you can create a bunch of different looks with it. Finally, they gave us something, you know, a little bit different. We were getting like pink palette after pink palette, and we do have a pink in here. We do have a pink, okay? So if you like your pinks, it's right there, guys. Is it like the most unique thing we've ever seen? No, okay? You saw the comparison with the Chanel de Lis palette. I really like it. I have a lot of fun with this palette, and I do think I'm gonna use it a lot this spring and summer. Now, taking a look at the Coral Flame palette, I also really like this one. I think it's a really beautiful, more warm-toned, neutral palette for anybody out there who is looking to buy something from Dior. You know, I have a lot of subscribers who don't own any Dior palettes, or maybe only own 1 or 2, and you're looking for something that is neutral, that you can wear every day, but maybe is like a little bit different, and I do think you get that with these pops of colors. I think that this is a good palette for somebody who just wants something very easy, but you also kind of appreciate some of the, you know, golden shifts and sparkliness. Any of these 4 shades for me can be a really easy one and done, like put it all over the eye and go type of shade. I really like the yellow shade. I think it's fresh and bright and just reminds me of like lemons and sunshine, but it is similar to a lot of things that I have in my collection, because I always keep buying palettes that are these colors because these are my colors, okay? So if I was a consumer, if I wasn't reviewing these for my channel, I would buy this palette, because this one is just too similar to like the Tom Ford palettes, etc. And then lastly, we have my thoughts on the new Dior Forever Glow Maximizer in the nude shade. This is really beautiful. It's great for my skin tone if I'm just looking for like a very basic glow that really just kind of melts into the skin. You guys already know I really like this formula. I very much have been enjoying the other 3 colors that I reviewed for you guys. I will say, however, that I don't think that this is an absolute must-have. If you already have a lot of other liquid highlighters in your collection, you probably already have something that is close to this. So if you have the Charlotte Tilbury Beauty Light Wands, if you have the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter as well, which I'm sorry, I couldn't find it. It's in like one of my travel bags. That's gonna be like almost exact as well, maybe like a little bit more golden, just depending on, you know, what tone you have, because there's a lot of shades in that range. This color is very dupeable. My favorite color is still the bronze one. Like the bronze or the rosy is what I would get, because I just feel like, you know, you could use it as a bronzer, you could use it as a blush, you could mix them together. You could use this as a good mixer, you know, if you like any of the other shades but you wish they were a little bit more toned down, you could mix this in. So I don't know, it's really good. If this is what you're looking for and you don't have this tone already in your collection, then yes, I would recommend getting this. But I just feel like a lot of us out there, we already have this color. Don't run out and get it just because like it's the new shade. I'm here to review it for you guys, and I would say take a look at what you have in your makeup drawer first before purchasing this. And that is it. That is all I have for you today, friends. I hope that this review and all the comparisons and the swatches and the demos were very, very helpful. If you liked this video, please don't forget to give me a big thumbs up, and make sure you leave me a comment down below letting me know, you know, what do you think of this collection? Did I sway you either way? Did you pick any of these up? What has your experience been with any of these products? I would love to hear all of your feedback, positive or negative. So leave me a comment down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And with that, friends, I hope that you see some beauty in your day, and I will see you in my next one. Goodbye.